So we're going to go ahead and get started today with our presentation. I want to welcome everyone to the September pecan topics. And we have some interesting topics today. We're going to talk about wildlife depredation and how to go about some of those things legally and protecting your crop. And then Jacob Harriett, he's with the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. He's in Lincoln County, and that's my county, just south of Pecan County. And he's going to be with us in a little bit to talk about wildlife control. And then Kelly Seuhs, he is in the entomology and plant pathology department. He's actually I think he's an alfalfa specialist, extension specialist, but he has worked with pecans for years and years, and with Phil Mulder, done lots of research and looking at different products to use on weevil and aphids and case bearer and webworm and everything. So Kelly knows a lot about the insects that we're going to be dealing with. But I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully I can get this to work today. Kind of had fits with it. All right, can anybody see my screen? Does it show the
Yep.
whole page?
That's it.
Okay, so you're not seeing my preview. All right, so for September, there's some things that we want to consider on our calendar for pecan growers, that fact sheet, HLA 6200. We can look at tree spacing, see if our trees are overcrowded, maybe think about marking some of those to take out this winter. We can look at the canopy spacing and see if they're touching, see how close they are, and mark those trees so we can tell what we need to be removing for this winter time when it's a little bit easier. We also want to look at getting our orchard floor prepped before we harvest. So if you've had cattle in your orchard or wild hogs or something, and you need to get those areas, those divots and things kind of worked up, you might want to get those holes filled, mow your orchard, get things ready before those nuts start to drop. So it's important to be ready before we start to see some of those early pecans fall. You also want to get out there early and check your equipment, all your harvest equipment. Do those repairs before it's time to start harvesting. Service everything, get everything repaired and in good working order before you start. That gets a little bit smoother start to the harvest season. And then we want to continue with our insect monitoring and control. There are things that still may jump up and get us at the end of the season. So we want to be sure that we are watching and we're a little bit more in control than those pests are. So we want to be monitoring well for the potential problems that might happen. We also want to check out, make sure, see what kind of diseases we might have. If it's hot and dry, a lot of those disease problems are going to be lessened at this time. But if we have a lot of scab already and we have problems with extra moisture, we may need to look at that and see if we need to be doing any fungicide applications. But normally those are more of a earlier in the season. If you want to cover crop in the orchard, September is a great time to get your soil prepped for that and that cover crop planted. Hopefully you'll have some time for that cover crop to get established before harvest time starts, especially with our native groves. A cover crop can really provide a lot of nitrogen for our pecan trees, and in some instances can provide all the nitrogen that you need on those native trees. And then it's also a good time to do some soil tests to look and see where you are for your pH, your phosphorus and potassium especially. Those are the three things to check, maybe every 3 to 5 years. And if you're looking at planting soon, then you want to do a soil test so you can amend the soil, get it ready for planting in the springtime. So just want to show you a few pictures from the research station, what's going on. These, I took them yesterday. Kanza, looking great. Pawnee, They're looking really nice. I do have some that are on lower branches closer to the ground where there's a little more humidity from the sprinklers that have some scab showing up. But overall, the upper portion of the tree looks pretty clean. And then our Merrimack, they started out this season with quite a bit of scab, especially for the research station. We're up on a hill, lots of wind flow. We usually don't have a lot of scab on the Merrimack, but this year we're seeing more than we have probably ever. And that's just due to the weather conditions and the Merrimack do have a higher susceptibility for scab. And it's just the right conditions to show up this season. So cut up in some of the nuts just to show you what they're looking like and how they're filling. And this is just a random nut or two that I cut open, what they were looking like. A few of the Kansas may be more filled than this, but on average, they have a little bit of ways to go. They're still not quite filled out all the way. You can see these little air pockets, and that indicates that they're not fully filled out. We need more water, more development, more nice sunny days. And that's one good thing we've had lately is a lot of sunshine. The last couple of years, we have not had a lot of sunlight, and that's kind of hurt our fill and our photosynthesis to make those really nice pecans. But you can see the Kansas are filling out nicely. You can see that the shell is hardened. You can see that it's, brown. You can see where it is. I couldn't peel any out. I didn't try that much on the Kansas, but the Pawnee, they are filled out more than the Kansas, and they are a little bit more advanced. You can see that shell is hardened as well. Our Merrimack, they're more of a mid-season ripening nut, and you can see where there's still a lot of air pockets in those nuts. They've got a little bit of ways to go. We've been concentrating on watering our Kansas and Pawnee. We really need to turn up the water on our Merrimack because they need to get filled out really well. And they've got a little ways to go. Now, if we look at some other ones, these are some just pollinator rows that we have, not big blocks, but our Peruke we have in one area, and they look like they're completely filled out. And you can peel the shuck on these. So they'll come out. It won't be very long until these will be at shuck split, and the crows and the squirrels and everything are going to be trying to get to these Peruke as quick as they can because they're one of the earliest ripening pecans. But you can see this, this is completely filled out. Now, if we look at a couple of our later pollinator rows, we've got Oconee, but you can see this little, it kind of looks like jelly or kind of slimy on the inside of where that kernel is going to be developing. That's the gel stage. And so I found Oconee ranging from water to gel. And so they are at this point, they're susceptible to weevil, and we need to really be looking at treating this row of pecans. Once they go from the water to the gel and dough stage, then they are susceptible to weevil egg laying. And then if we look at Caddo, you can see it is also at the gel stage. I found a lot of them that were still in the water stage, but this one has a really good layer of that gel on the inside of that area that's going to be the kernel. Now, if we look overall just at some of the nuts in the shucks, you can see the scab lesions on some of these Merrimack. The Peruke are pretty clean. You can see a few lesions on our Pawnee and the Kansas. These nuts are really nice sized, but if you look at the shucks on these Pawnee and Kansas, the shucks are much thicker than some of the other varieties too. So it makes them look a little bit bigger than they actually are. The Oconee and the Caddo, they still have a little ways to go. And the Oconee is probably going to get a little bit bigger than what it's showing right here. But just overall, I wanted you to notice that there are a lot of differences in how they ripen. So if we're doing certain management treatments based on the development, we really need to know what the different varieties look like. So we'll know where we need to have those weevil sprays, where we need to concentrate our water, those kind of things. So we know what stage they're at so we can take care of them properly. So this is going to be our early ripening. You can see the nut here that peeled out of the shuck. Then we'll probably go to Pawnee, then Kansas, and then we'll go to Merrimack, and then probably Oconee and Caddo will be pretty close on ripening time. But there are quite a ways difference than the Pawnee and Kansas. So I want to remind you, don't stop managing your pecans just yet. There are things that you still need to be doing in the orchard, and those are monitoring for our weevil, looking for other insect pests. We want to start managing our wildlife population. We started doing some trapping at the station just this week and have caught a couple of squirrels. And then make sure that you've got your water going. It's been really dry, especially in some locations. So without water, they're not going to fill properly. So we want to get the water to them right now. Some of these pecans, especially the larger nuts during this time when they're filling, they need about 2 inches of water per week during this time of the season. So we want to make sure that they're getting plenty of water to get nice high quality pecans. I wanted to mention pecan weevil. I know Kelly's going to talk about it, but I wanted to show this cool picture that Lewis Morton sent to me a few weeks ago. And this wheel bug, it's a beneficial insect. They eat other type of insects, but this is a pecan weevil, and it looks like the weevil has its proboscis down, maybe even chewing on that shuck. And it looks like this wheel bug is almost stomping on that proboscis right here. It's got it held in place. And then it's got its snout. I don't know, Kelly can give us better terminology, but it's got its snout right between the head and the body of that weevil. So it is a predator on pecan weevil, and I didn't realize this. And so that's pretty cool to get an action shot like that. And I wanted to thank Lewis for sending that in to me. But it's a pretty cool shot. But we need to be monitoring our weevil traps, looking for those weevil. And then this was a nut that I found on the ground under one of our trees that didn't get harvested last year. So there is evidence in some of those areas where we do have weevil. And if you have an area that you have weevil year after year, that's the area you really need to concentrate on, put your traps at. So you know they're in the soil under those trees, so they'll come back out of that area and go up those trees. So that's a good indicator area. Some other things I saw at the station, I did show you some scab pictures already. There's a little bit of powdery mildew on some of our Kansas. And then I found a couple of these that look like anthracnose on our Oconee. I didn't see this on any of the other pecan varieties out there at the station, but I did see a few on the Oconee variety. And this causes the shuck to brown down, and it almost kind of opens at the tip, like it kind of tulips open at the end. So that's usually anthracnose. They may have had the infection early on in the season, but it only shows up later in the season. So fungicide applications are how you're going to control each one of these different diseases. And it usually starts early season to get good protection. So this was pretty interesting. I was out at the station yesterday, and these are some Kansas trees, and they are loaded with pecans. And if you remember back in October, we had an ice storm, and these are some pictures that were taken this last early spring in the wintertime. And so you can see a lot of these branches were cut off. And where these were cut back severely, we have a lot of really new growth, a lot of new shoots pushing from those areas. But these limbs that were left intact are just completely loaded with pecans. And so I'm hoping that all these new leaves that are being pushed are also helping to fill these pecans as well. But these trees may be a little bit interesting to harvest just because the weight is going to be distributed a little bit different than normal. And so we may have to harvest these a little bit differently, maybe a couple of different times to get them to fall. But I'll add some information on that as we get into harvest time in our October and November sessions. But I just thought it was pretty interesting. You can see these shoots are just completely loaded with pecans. And on our Kansas, I'm seeing very large clusters too, not just a lot of clusters, but a lot of very large clusters. This was interesting. I saw the National Pecan Shellers Association, their crop forecast that they made, and they have Oklahoma as producing about 15 million pounds this year. Our average over the last, I don't know, 50 years has probably been around 17 million. The last 10 years or so, we've probably averaged around 15 million. So it looks like maybe an average season, an average harvest for this year. We'll see if scab ends up being an issue for some of our growers and reduces that crop due to disease pressure early in the season. But you can see some of these states like Georgia and New Mexico are looking at huge crops, and others are much smaller than normal. But if you look at the overall US estimate, they're looking at 322 million pounds. But and we usually have about 250 to 300. So this is a large crop for this year. So it's just an estimate, but we will have better numbers through the year looking at what is actually brought in. And it helps if we have good prices on our natives. That will improve our number of pounds harvested as well. If prices are low, people won't get out and harvest as much. Wanted to mention we do have a field day. The Oklahoma Pecan Growers Association, along with the Horticulture Department and Noble Research Institute and the Pontotoc County Extension Office, we're having a field day at the Bryant Pecan Farms near Ada. And so you need to register for the event. It is free, but it's September 23rd. Registration at the field day starts at 2:30. But I need you to register online with ssloan@okpecangrowers.com so we can plan for dinner that night. We're going to have probably a barbecue dinner at the farm. And we also did get approval for 1 CEU for those private pesticide applicators. Those that have a license, you can get 1 CEU towards your testing. And if you have questions about that, be sure and holler at me. We have 2 more Zooms scheduled for this year, October 8th and November 5th. Be sure and put those on your calendar. And then I just wanted to post this. It's kind of not really pecan related, but it is horticulture related. And there's a lot of interest in GMOs and genetically modified crops. And so this is kind of it's a free lecture webinar, and we've got a specialist that he's going to present some information on GMOs. So I think it's going to be an interesting webinar. It's going to be, it's put on by the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture. And this is made possible through a H. Grant Vest Family Endowment. And they're going to have several different lectures through the year. So pretty interesting. You can register online at the Horticulture Department just by using that QR code on your phone. And then there's my contact information. If you have questions, most people know how to get a hold of me, but anytime that you have a question, just let me know and I'd be happy to help anybody out. So any questions on anything I presented in that time? You can either put them in the chat or unmute. Let's see if I've got any questions here. All right, no questions. All right, well, Jacob, would you like to go next and talk about what pecan growers need to do to be able to protect their crop legally? Can you do that for us?
Absolutely. I hope I don't bore you too much.
No, but Jacob is with the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation, and he is the Lincoln County Game Warden. And so I'm excited to have him with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Happy you had me. I can promise all of you know way more about pecans than I ever knew that somebody could know about pecans. So I've actually learned a lot just watching some of the past class preparing for this. Um, but like she said, I'm Jacob Harriett. I'm the Lincoln County Game Warden. I've been here for about 2 years now. Uh, you know, y'all have a bunch of pests. You're trying to, get a good crop, and then of course everything else is trying to eat it because they're delicious. And we just want to keep you legal in doing that. And we're here to help. But kind of how the wildlife department views this is we do not own the wildlife. The wildlife is owned by the people of Oklahoma. And all we do is manage the wildlife and how you can and can't harvest it based off of, kind of populations, and just trying to basically keep them around for generations to come. So I think the basic species that I would assume y'all have trouble with and what I've dealt with in the past, and if anybody has anything else that I don't touch on, please ask, but would probably be your crows, squirrels, raccoons, and I was actually thinking beaver might be a concern too for those people in kind of low-lying areas where they can cause some flooding issues. But basically how the depredation process works is you'll call your local game warden, which we can be found online or in our free hunting and fishing regulations. But you just give us a call and kind of tell us what's going on. We'll ask you some questions. And to get a depredation permit, we actually have to do two forms. We have a complaint form, and then we have what we, authorize control form. So we'll come out, we'll inspect the property, we'll make sure that there are depredation issues, and then we'll assign kind of whatever we think is necessary to control those issues. So one of the huge things that I always push is, and I honestly, I don't mess with pecans a whole lot. I have a few guys that have some issues, but just with any sort of depredation permit, we would rather you harvest those animals legally, utilize those animals, and do it all in the seasons where it's legal to do so. So that's one of the major questions is, do you allow hunting? And it's kind of tricky with you guys because, everybody deer hunts, but there's not many people out there that still, squirrel hunt, and they still raccoon hunt. And that's really a shame. But as far as the squirrels and stuff go, people still hunt those. Access is everything. So there's a lot of people that would love to do it, but they just have kind of given up on it because access is so hard. So that's where I think there's a huge benefit with you guys needing the help, and because there's people out there that want to hunt. And if you don't know of somebody, get a hold of your local warden. They probably might know of somebody that would be willing to go out there and hunt and be happy to do so. But anyways, we'll come out and we'll do an inspection. And if y'all have pecan trees, there's going to be depredation. So we'll ask you, have you let anybody hunt? Have you, how many people have you let hunt? What was their harvest rates? Kind of stuff like that. Just a basic generic deal. And then we'll go into what you've done to prevent it. So what have you done to prevent these species from doing this, that would prevent them from doing it out of season. So basically we want you to justify that you've done any method you could to prevent this animal. And now that they're still here and they're still costing you, time, money, resources, that we need to give you a permit for it. And it's pretty relaxed. We're not too hard on anybody. But that's basically it on the permits. We'll come out, do an inspection. Once we get all that, we'll issue the permits to you, and I agree with the landowners on whatever control method they have. I can assign, shooting at night, but if you don't have the methods to shoot at night, it doesn't do you any good. So I'll just talk with you and kind of figure out, what do you have kind of at your dispendability and what you can do with that, whether that's trapping, hunting, shooting at night, anything along that. But I wanted to kind of just break down the seasons on stuff, and we'll just start with squirrel. So squirrel season opens up in May and goes clear through, let's see, I'm gonna get me lying to you here. Let's see here. I think it opens up the 25th and it goes through January 31st. So that should pretty much, to my knowledge, cover a lot of your issues with pecans. I think that covers all your time frame, and you can kill 25 squirrels. So if you can't make a benefit on your orchard by killing 25 squirrels, you really need the permit, because I think that's per person. So per licensed hunter can go out there and kill 25 squirrels a day, and that should help you out a lot. after squirrels, crows are kind of a little different because a crow is actually considered a migratory bird. So there's some federal law we get into when we get into depredation processes for them, but they actually have a season. So crows do have a season. I know a lot of people don't know that, but that season is the 10th of October through November 16th, and then December 9th through March 4th. So that's where, you might have some issues because where you're having problems with them, you actually don't have an open season for them. So we can work around that, and that's where those depredations come in handy. Your raccoons, like I said, there's not a lot of people out there hunting raccoons anymore. The fur prices are terrible. So really, the last ones I trapped, you can't even hardly sell the hides. There's not a lot of people out there, but we know that as a department, we're actually encouraging people to do that. So now there's no limit on raccoons, and the season's open year round, which is great for y'all. If you're hunting them at night, you just follow those regulations for hunting with a dog. If you need, they're getting in there. That's what we see a lot of times is they're getting at there at night. The people don't have access to a coon dog or something like that. And that's where those depredation permits come in, because we can give you legal means to take those at night. And then your beaver is the same way. There's no limit on them, and there's no season per se in the depredation sense. So you guys can either hire somebody to trap them or trap them yourself, and we can give you permits to do that and use a little more effective traps for that. Because legally right now, all you can use is foothold traps for them, which your snares and conibear traps are a lot more effective. And other than that, I'm trying to think of anything else that I can kind of, give knowledge to. Deer might be something you run into with young trees. If you're having deer come in and rubbing on the trees and stuff like that. And deer is a pretty sensitive subject just because people love to hunt deer. That's primarily, what people are after. So when we give a depredation permit that allows you to go in there and shoot deer, out of season, but your neighbor's been over there getting ready for deer hunting all year long, there can be some conflict. So that's why we really encourage taking those during regular deer season. And you can, with the seasons now, we have a lot of deer and especially a lot of does. So we're strongly encouraging the take of does. And so a legal hunter can take 8 deer a year with archery equipment. So, that's a lot, and that's per hunter. So if you get a few hunters out there and you're having a deer problem, you can put a big dent in that. We really don't like to give antler deer tags, mainly just because of the pressure of hunters. And, that's what most of our hunters are after. And how the wildlife department is funded is we're pretty much funded through the license sales of hunters and anglers. So that's kind of our people we lean towards, trying to keep them happy. But other than that, we'll come out, do our inspection, talk to you, figure out what we need to do. We'll issue the permits. We set a time on the permits. So, I'll give you, say you're having an issue with squirrels during harvest time. So I'll block off a section of time that permit's good for. After that, you can call me back if you're still having issues. We can do another permit. And it's really not a big deal, but we just have to have a cutoff on it. It's not, I write you a paper for the rest of your life. You can shoot squirrels as much as you want, whenever you want. But that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Like I said, contact your local warden. Our numbers are in the reg books and they're online. We're not hard to find, and we get a lot of phone calls, so we're happy to help. That's what we're here for. But other than that, thanks for having me. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot more in this class, but I'll be happy to take questions and whatever else I can do to help.
I always encourage people to have that relationship with your game warden before there's a problem. So know who to contact before you have issues, and have that relationship. Let them know that you are growing pecans, and so they know you, they know what's going on. So it's better to have that relationship beforehand than do something and then get in trouble later.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that's huge is just having that relationship with us. Yes, it's beneficial for you guys, but it's also beneficial to us. I know I have some pecan orchards here, and I can't be everywhere at once. I have a huge county to cover, but if something's going on, I've had some of my pecan guys that have seen people shoot deer out of their pecan bottoms off the road. And so they call me up. I know exactly who they are. I can get there quick. I don't have to map it. I know where they're at, and I can get out there quick, and it helps us out tremendously too. So I love knowing my landowners.
I noticed that Susan put a question about feral hogs. Can you talk a little bit about that or direct
Yeah,
her to where she might need to go?
absolutely. So believe it or not, a hog is not considered wildlife. So we don't hardly have anything to do with them. That's Department of Ag that handles that, where my knowledge would come in on it. So if you want to hunt feral hogs at night, we have a nighttime permit you have to get and it's free. Um, but we don't really regulate on them. You don't have to have a hunt license to kill pigs because they're not wildlife. But you can go online to our website and get that free nighttime permit, and it actually does a really good job of walking you through the regulations on that. Um, and all I ask of people is let me know when you're doing it, because really the only reason we even have that permit is so that I know that you're out there doing it and I don't think you're out shooting deer or something like that. And it is closed during the big game season. So October 1st through the end of January, you can't do it. And it's also closed during turkey season. So, but other than that, I have people that, I mean, that's what they do. They go out and just, drop those pig numbers down as much as they can. But you fill out that permit, you're good to go. It's good for a year, and you can hunt whenever you want on the property that you listed in the permit. And all I ask is shoot me a text and say, hey, I'm going to be out hunting pigs tonight. That way, if I get a call from county or something saying that there's a bunch of shooting going on in a bottom, then I'm not screaming out there just to find you hunting pigs. But
It seems to me like I've noticed I have friends that farm along the Cimarron River, and whenever people come in and hunt their areas for a few days or a little while, it kind of harasses those hogs and they move on. Now it may just be moving to your neighbor's place, but it seems like harassment. They do move out a little bit. And I know that there's traps and some other things that you can use, but it is a big issue, especially in those areas along the rivers where they can travel really easily. So I did notice today that Oklahoma Department of Ag posted a new oral contraceptive for hogs called Hog Stop. And so it's a type of feed. And so it makes the male infertile for a number of weeks, I think. And so that may be something to look at. I just saw it today. I think it's brand new. So if you're interested, I think that ODAF or Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food and Forestry would be the place to check out that. You can look on their Facebook page as well. Are there different types of squirrel traps, Jacob, that you're supposed to use? Or are there things that are more effective? Or do you have any suggestions on squirrel traps?
I don't see them just a ton, but because usually what I've dealt with, people who are trapping squirrels are trying to get them out of attics and stuff like that, more so than keeping them out. So actually, come to think of it, I don't think there's a legal means to take for squirrel that is a trap. So I think you would have to get a depredation permit to
Okay.
trap the period. But I know, snares can work. The little 110 conibear traps work really well. They're a kill on contact trap, but you have to have the permit to do those, of course.
Yeah.
And then like your picture, that foothold trap on the plank is pretty effective.
Yeah,
Uh,
it seems like they go up and then before they get down, they'll go to that last limb. And so they don't know the difference between that little plank that you put out there and a limb. So they get right on there and get in the trap. So that works pretty well for us at the station.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But
Now,
other, like I said, I don't deal with squirrel trapping just a whole lot. Uh, but I'm reading right now. Yeah, so technically, in legal means of take, you can't trap squirrels.
okay.
But
So
with
it's
that permit,
through that depredation. Okay. So also Sharon had mentioned a question about relocating raccoons from like homeowners pecan trees. Where can they take them? Is that okay to do that? What should they do if they catch raccoons in their neighborhood?
well, so that's kind of a tricky thing. Basically, unless you take them a long ways, they're going to be right back. And you're kind of just sharing the problem, in my opinion. If you catch them on your place, you take them over to your neighbors. Now your neighbor has problems with them. And really, like I said, nobody traps raccoons. The fur market used to be a great deal. It kind of kept their numbers in check. But now we just have so many of them that I get calls all the time. Residential people have them in their house, have them in their yards, and they take them, they let them go, and then they're in somebody else's house and in their yard. So humanely dispatching them would be what I recommend. But
That's kind of hard to do if you're in town too, though. It's hard
yeah,
to,
absolutely. Yeah. I really frown upon taking them somewhere else and letting them go. I don't think I think it's just spreading the problem.
sure.
And you moving those critters and stuff too, you can spread diseases and stuff like that as well.
Okay.
But
All
I would
right.
frown upon it. If you have to, you can, but I frown upon it.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? You can put them in the chat, or you can unmute to ask a question to Jacob. I appreciate you coming today. I know you're busy out running around in your office today. And so appreciate it. I think it's so important that people have this knowledge to do things properly, because I hate to see someone try to, protect their crop and they're doing it illegally and get in trouble. So make sure that get one of those guides that you were talking about, the free hunting
regulations.
regulations.
Or at any Walmart or Academy. And another good resource I should have mentioned earlier is there are what we call nuisance wildlife control operators, which is basically they trap animals for a living. That's what they do. And they're not with the department, but they're licensed through us. So we actually have a list of them by county on our website that you can check out. Might be something good to know if you're having a major problem and you don't have the means to take care of it yourself. And then also there are stake trappers that they mess with pigs and beaver is mainly what they do. But that's a good resource too, but they're stretched pretty thin as well. But it never hurts to give them a call and see if they have time to help you out.
Yeah, that's great advice. We've always heard that a squirrel or a crow can take about a pound of pecans a day. So if you look at the price of pecans, a pound a day, and there's never just one, there's always, if it's especially crows, the whole tree might be black with crows, but it may be worth putting a bounty and paying somebody to hunt and paying them so much per crow to, help. Or like you said, just offering your area to someone who you trust that likes to hunt too. So it's, I know it's kind of difficult to let everybody in to hunt just because you don't know some people, but if you have that, relationship with some hunters, that might help you out. But definitely doing some modification to around the orchard where if you see like den trees or something where the squirrels are living, or making an area a buffer zone, maybe between your orchard and other wooded areas, maybe clean that up where those squirrels have to, travel further before they get to a tree. It's going to slow them down and make them more obvious to other predators. So doing some modification to the orchard can help with those things, but normally you're going to have to do some type of trapping or hunting to keep those in check. It's just really difficult because, like you said, everything likes pecans. So we have deer and turkey and squirrels and crows, possums, everything out in the orchard. So it's hard to take care of that crop all year and then share it freely with everything too. So, but anybody have a question for Jacob? Any last thoughts about? All right, well, I appreciate you so much, Jacob, and appreciate you being here with us, and we thank you very much.
Happy to be here. I'm gonna sit back and learn some more.
Okay, well, thank you. You're welcome. All right, Kelly, are you ready to talk today? This is Kelly Seuhs, and he is with the Entomology and Plant Pathology Department on campus. And Kelly has worked with Dr. Mulder and many other professors in the department. And like I said, he's done a lot of research. I worked with Kelly for a long time on different types of pests and looking at the different control and how to manage those insect pests. So we'll see what Kelly's got to share with us today on some late season insect pests. Kelly, are you there? Can you unmute for us?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was unmuted, but I think you muted everybody a while ago.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Kelly Seuhs. I'm an associate extension specialist in the Department of Entomology and Plant Pathology. Been with the department about a little over 20 years now, and I've worked with Dr. Phil Moeller for most of that time, and I've worked with a lot of different crops, and one of them has been pecans. So I'm happy to try to present some information to you guys, and hopefully update you on some things we're seeing currently in the orchards, at least around here in Perkins, in the Perkins Stillwater area. So we all know that the pecan weevil is a major pest. I hope you can't see the screen. Okay, is that okay? Okay. It's a major pest. We all know that, and so we were discussing a little bit earlier about weevils emerge after heavy rainfall. And so if you happen to be in an area across the state that hasn't got a lot of rain yet, you may not have seen much activity, but you must remain vigilant because that may be something that's coming down the line. So if they can be susceptible from dough stage to shuck split, so late July into August, all the way through mid-October. So we're not out of the woods yet. If you haven't seen activity, you may still see some later on. So like that at Perkins, we've seen some fairly heavy rainfall events in early August, started seeing some emergence. And so, but at that time, most of the pecans were still in the water stage. And so those that might have been affected at that time just aborted and fell to the ground. But since then, we also seen some continuing activity, and so they've actually had to spray 2 times. Late about the 20th, I think Becky, about the 20th of August and the last part of August. So they've actually sprayed twice. And I was down looking at the some in the Kansas and the Pawnees Wednesday, I believe, and looked at some of the traps, and they're still seeing some pretty significant numbers in some of the traps down there. Currently still, we're kind of in the peak time right now. So that would be stand to reason, but they've been seeing them in that looser, sandier soil for a while since they got those rains. But if you're not seeing them now, you still need to be monitoring because you may still see them later on in October by shuck split, depending on where you're at and your maturity level. So some things to keep in mind. Oops. Okay. So we just talked about that weevils emerge from the soil after heavy rain, generally in August, but they usually peak in September, about right now through the end of September. So, but it can extend into mid-October. So we need to, like I said, stay vigilant and monitoring and seeing what's happening out there because we may not be out of the woods yet. And like Phil talked about last time, back in July, he said there's been people get burned because they think, well, there's not much rain, there's not much activity, I'm not seeing any kind of emergence, and all of a sudden, late September, early October rolls around, you get a little rain, and here they come. So be vigilant about it. Be mindful that they can still happen in all through shuck split into mid-October. We know that the adults attack in the water. If they look at them in the water stage, they cause them to abort and fall to the ground, and they can attack about and eat about a quarter of a nut per weevil per day. So at that stage, they're in the water stage, they're going to fall to the ground. They're not going to be as big of an issue. Where we get into problems is late gel stage, suitable for egg laying, into the dough stage where we're at right now is really ideal conditions. And so that's now when we really want to concentrate on our monitoring and checking traps if we have traps, or just monitoring in general to see what we have out there and if we need to do some spraying and have some control going on. The female oviposition takes place in about 15 to 30 nuts, 2 to 3 eggs per nut, and then they feed for about 30 days before chewing an exit hole, falling to the ground, and then they bury into the soil, creating that earthen cell that Phyllis talked about previously. And so We just need to be aware that we want to monitor that before that happens. And so we're going to look at some things here that I think we had a question earlier in the before the meeting started about how do they get into the nut. And so Bert was asking something about that. So the picture right here on the left is actually a puncture hole that this pecan has actually chewed with this proboscis, and it's got chewing mouth parts at the end, and it actually chewed a hole through the shuck, and it's went through the shell, and it's getting ready to lay eggs. And so, that's what you see here, the eggs that's been laid in the actual kernel of through the shell. The female tries to position herself around here, and you see these little track marks is where she's been trying to grip and get a good penetration. To get good penetration, she's gripped with her feet to chew through this shell. And then she turns around with the ovipositor and deposits the eggs in up to 2 to 4 within this shell, within the nut. And so that's what you see right here is 3, there's 1 here and 2 here. So there's 3 in this particular nut. And then you can see the damage potential that it has. It just basically destroys the kernel within that nut when it puts that in there. So that's what we don't want to have happen, and we want to prevent that from happening if at all possible. That it feeds for about 30 to 42 days, and it just destroys the kernel. And then this is the damage, what it does. After that 30 to 42 days, it kind of creates an exit hole, symmetrical exit hole, comes out, falls to the ground, and does its burying, and it buries itself in the soil, creates its earthen cell, and it starts the cycle for the next generation. But at this point, it's too late to salvage the kernel. So that's what we're trying to prevent, is anything happening in this particular time frame. Really susceptible during this dose stage, during this peak September month, generally, to try to protect what we can, do what we can to protect the nuts.
Hey, Kelly, I'm sorry. A lot of people think that hole where the larvae come out is where the female laid the egg, but it's a completely different hole, right?
Yes. So the hole that you see, the hole that you see here is probably about 1/8 of an inch, but the hole that is created over here where she actually deposits the eggs, I should have put a picture of that, is minute. I mean, it's very minute, and it's, if you was to peel the shuck back and look at that, it looks like a little pinhole. It's very, very minute. But as these larvae develop and hatch and get bigger, then they need a bigger hole to exit. But when she puts the eggs and deposits the eggs in there, it is a minute, less than the almost the size of a pinhead, the sharp part of a pinhead. So it's very, very small. A good point. And so yeah, but this is what we're trying to prevent. And so, like I said, they will spend 2 to 3 years in the soil. They create that impenetrable earthen cell, and they stay in the. After they get in the ground for the first year, 90% will actually pupate, and the adult will not emerge, but it will actually pupate and turn into adult, but the adult will not come out and emerge until the following year. So, and then the second year, the same scenario happens, but the remaining 10% doing the pupating and turning to the adult. But again, those adults won't emerge until the following year. So consequently, you've got, from the time they enter the soil as larvae to adults, takes about 2 to 3 years. And so there's that much variance in the populations and how they enter the soil, and consequently how they emerge. So it makes it a lot more difficult to control. So that makes the timing of what we do on top of the ground as far as trapping and monitoring more important, because there is so much variance in how they enter the soil and how they emerge at the end. So some treatment considerations. I think he's visited with you guys about this before. The 7 products that we've used in the past have been really good products, and they still are, but they have got to be pretty expensive. Comparably, if you look at this, and considerations to be made on a cost per acre basis, not a like cost per tree basis, but cost per acre. So if you're looking at a $67.6 or $67 a gallon, something like 7, if you, depending on the rate you use, you're looking at a $33 to $84 per acre rate. And a lot of times the 7 products, you definitely will probably have to make multiple applications. And so you're looking at, quite a bit of money per acre throughout the season, depending on how many times you have to spray. And so compare that to a pyrethroid or a lambda product that costs about the same amount per gallon, but the cost is only going to be $1.20 to $2.50 per acre. And so there's a very, very big difference in the cost per acre. Much more economical to go the pyrethroid route and get that better cost economics for your production cost. Again, we've talked about weevil timing. It's variable depending on the moisture. It's like some people may have seen some activity already, some people not. Lots of different variables on that, especially moisture. And like Becky talked before, it's best to trap on indicator trees. If you've got a hot area that you know is prone for weevil activity, it's good to put traps on those trees, or at least monitor those trees. And if they're early varieties, especially if they're prone to mature earlier, then there's probably going to be more activity earlier on those trees. And also in sandier soils, if you have activity that's going to happen earlier, they're going to be able to come out of the soil quicker in looser soils. So monitor early varieties, and also in sandier soils is going to be very important. And depending on the management history, it may take up to 4 applications. So again, looking at the cost, if you're looking at a couple dollars per acre cost versus 30, 40, 50 more dollars per acre, take that into consideration for the times you may have to spray. At the station, they do a pretty good job, and so say a couple applications a year may cover it, but it may take more depending on the season and what's going on in that particular situation. So keep that in mind as far as cost considerations. Also keep in mind that this time of year, if you are going to be putting out some pyrethroid applications for weevil control during this time, late August, early September, consider mixing that with an aphicide or some kind of product that'll control aphids. We tend to see, we spend the whole year, aphids can come out earlier than that, but if they tend to be under control by the beneficials and the good guy insects that we have out there. But this time of year, when we have the spray that we spray like a pyrethroid that we spray for weevil, that tends to knock down the beneficials. And so we have a tendency to have a increase about this time of year if you take out the beneficials, increase in aphids. So we've been recommending to put an aphicide with that spray to try to mitigate the damage and problems that you have with aphids. And so our objective of this mainly is to keep the leaves on the trees as late as possible, because you're not only getting the nutrient value for this year, but you're also setting the crop for next year as well, the fruit set. So you want to keep the leaves on the trees as much as possible. When you're looking at organic growers, unfortunately, if you're wanting to go that route, the options are pretty limited. We've used the Grand Evo product, which is a biological product in the past. We had pretty good results with it, but it was on one test a couple of years ago that, and the overall numbers in that test were not very high, and so we can't say for certain that it's it had similar results of some of the other products that we used, but it was on a test that we didn't have a whole lot of numbers, weevil numbers anyway, but it is an option. But the downside is it's very expensive. And again, if you have to make multiple applications, it's going to cost, 2 to 4 applications times $30 per acre. It's going to cost quite a bit of money. So if you want to go that route and you're in a situation where you want to go to the organic side of things, hopefully you're getting a premium price for those products. shifting gears a little bit to the aphids. When we're looking at aphids, we're looking at predominantly 3 species. We're looking at yellow aphids. We're looking at black margin aphids right here in this picture right here, and black. There's another aphid. There's a yellow aphid that looks similar to this aphid, and sometimes in the field it's hard to see. And we'll see some a little bit better picture of that here in just a minute. But I wanted to compare, if you're looking at this particular aphid in the field or the yellow aphid, they're similar in body structure, but the black margined aphid has these bands that most of the time you can see on the outer edge of the wings, and the wings lay flat, compared to the black aphid, which is pretty easy to identify if it's black or darker in color. The wings, as in a resting state, kind of fold to the top and make it like a tent or a roof, so they're kind of overlapping each other. And so that's a telltale sign. And we'll see that more in the yellow aphid complex here in a picture in just a second. But in relation to weevil, like I said previously, beneficials, this is a lady beetle larva that's feeding on some aphids. If in relation to weevil, like I said previously, if the beneficial population is building throughout the year and you're not spraying things that are knocking them down, then you're looking at beneficials throughout most of the summer taking care of the aphid populations. But this time of year, if you're having to think about weevil sprays, and those sprays are going to knock down your beneficial population, the aphid populations are going to explode pretty quick if they don't have any beneficials to keep them under control. And so what we're looking at is, if you're seeing a lot of aphids right here, you can't see it as well on this, but you're looking at, if you get a number of aphids, high number of aphids on the leaves, and you get some honeydew and you get some sooty mold or things like that help to prevent photosynthesis, then you're gonna stop production of nutrients traveling to the plants, throughout the tree, to the leaves, and getting production for the nuts for the next year and the flower set. And also, if you've got looking at feeding damage from the black aphid, looking at the leaves and the discoloration and the feeding point, you're looking at discoloration here. Look at those feeding points. That's where the plant has had a reaction to the feeding of the aphid, and that's a telltale sign of the black aphid feeding. And so those leaves will eventually die off and just fall off, and they'll defoliate the leaf material on that tree, as well as that. And so the honeydew and the lack of photosynthesis and the leaf drop is what we're trying to protect and delay as long as possible. So we know that the life cycle on the aphid is single metamorphosis, egg, nymphs, and adults. They hatch in March and migrate to the leaves during the growing season. And so the females give 5 births throughout the season, and from birth to reproductive unit, adult could be about 7 days. So things can happen really quick, and there could be 20 or more generations per year. And so that's why it's really important that if the beneficials are keeping things in check throughout most of the year, but then we knock them out or knock them down toward the end of the season, things can happen really quick in the right conditions, and the aphids can really rebound really quickly. So we need to keep them under control as much as possible. Then at the end of the season, male and females both appear in the fall, and they lay eggs, and they overwinter in crevices and any good hiding spots that they can have, and they can find where they can overwinter. So we're looking at here. This is a little bit better example. This is the yellow aphid here on the left. Its wings are kind of similar to the black aphid, where they kind of in a tent-like fashion, compared to the yellow aphid here, or the black margin aphid, where it's got these little bands on the edges of the wings. And so that's a way you can identify the 2 yellow complex species right here. Is both of them are yellow bodies, but the wing pattern is a little bit different. like I said, it's hard to tell in the field when you're trying to identify them like that, but it's usually easy to tell that it's a yellow or black margin versus a black. So it's a fairly easy. And then, like I said, telltale signs in the field about in the leaf material. If there's some red discoloration, feeding damage from the blacks, it's going to be really pronounced. And like I said, eventually those leaves will fall off, and that's what we're trying to prevent. They can reduce nut quality, of course. Reduce flowers for next year. We will try to prevent defoliation as much as possible. The honeydew provides a food source for sooty mold, prevents photosynthesis, and we just lose the nutrient value of the leaves transporting to the nutrients for the tree. And premature defoliation means less return for blooms in the next year. And so this is a picture of some honeydew and some real shiny leaves and a lot of aphids on them and a lot of shiny leaves. And so the photosynthesis part of that's going to get really diminished if we let that go on for very long. So some control measures we look at sometimes. Dormant oil applications are of some value in the early season during the dormant time of year, February, early March, before bud break, because if you put a dormant oil application out after that, it can damage and have some a lot of toxicity to the tree. So we want to have that done in the overwintering dormant stage, but it can help in taking care of some early, if you're taking care of some early like scale problems or things like that, it can help in doing some control with the aphids and mites and things like that also overwinter in the crevices of bark and limbs of the tree. But coverage is a key on that particular application. So we also want to limit the sprays of pyrethroids and other non-selective insecticides early in the season. Like we talked earlier, we want to allow the populations of beneficials to build as much as possible and help us out as much as they can before we have to start putting those late season weevil sprays out to allow the natural enemies to build and help us control that. And then when we have to make our weevil sprays about this time of year, then we can add some aphicides products to that to help control the aphids as well, because we know if we knock the beneficials down, the aphids more than likely will come on pretty quick. And so these are just a couple of some examples of some insecticides we have available for aphids right now. There's a lot of this. This is not a full list, but it's some of the more popular ones we see. Lots of different options, and as you notice that what we're looking at here, the main take-home point here, there's a lot of options, varying price, but rotation is the key. If you're having to make multiple aphid applications, it's best to look at the number on the label and see if they're different, what kind of different numbers they are. And if you're having to make multiple sprays, change that mode of action number. It's directed by the IRAC or IRAC, Insecticide Resistance Action Committee, and their modes of action are different. Different products or have different modes of action, and so we're wanting to delay or prolong resistance of any of these products as long as we can. A case in point is imidacloprid. Showed as a really good product for years, started showing some resistance in Texas several years ago, so they quit using it. And as some of these other products come along, they started using those and started migrating and rotating some of these products. And they come back and started using some, after several years of not using it, they come back and they started using imidacloprid again with some pretty good results. So that tells you that, you know, over time, especially in aphids where they have so many generations, over time, a resistance can build up if you use the same product over and over and over. And so if we can rotate these products, hopefully we can keep them around for quite a while. Just briefly, I think Dr. Mulderfield touched on some things. Some other late season pests that we look at and see sometimes is stink bug and leaf-footed bug. this time of year. They don't actually reproduce or develop on pecans, but they can cause some significant problems. They actually develop on host plants outside the orchard and can include certain weeds and crops that you might see. You may or may not have them in your area, or I think a lot of them in eastern Oklahoma, maybe southeast, but in certain field crops, they can develop on those. And at this time of year is when we're starting to harvest those crops. They're starting to mature. We're starting to harvest those crops. They're going to be looking for another food source. And so if you've got a pecan orchard nearby, they're prone to come to pecans and start feeding. They can cause several different types of damage, like black pit and what you see over here on the kernel spot on the right picture. They can go through the shell. They can do some feeding, and they cause discoloration, which can cause a bad look for marketing. And also the taste of it's kind of bitter, and so it's not very marketable nut if it looks like that. So we want to prevent that as much as possible. And it can happen late. They can penetrate a hardened shell even after the tree's been shaken and nuts are on the ground to be harvested. So even though you've got it out there shaking, you think, man, I've got everything done. I've controlled the weevil. I've got everything taken care of. You still need to be aware of what's going on and kind of monitoring things, because they can still be out there even late in the season, and they can penetrate that hard shell and do this kind of damage. So be aware that there's some things out there late that can happen. Control and eliminate the weed host. Do all you can to knock that down. If you got cultivated crops or trap crops adjacent to the orchard, monitor those, and if possible, control those within the crop before they even come to the pecan orchard. And then if you've got insecticide application, there's insecticide for late season pests. They can help for like pecan weevil and some of the other pests that we look at. They can help in reducing infestation levels for stink bug and leaf-footed bugs. So just a few things to keep in mind, that things can happen. There's a few things can happen late, but best thing is still be out monitoring and stay vigilant about what's going on, and seeing what's out there until you get the crop put up. So with that, I think that's about all I had. And there's my contact information. You can, if you have any questions about different pests or anything else, just let me know, or Becky can get a hold of me, or however you want to do it. So
all right. Thanks, Kelly. That was a good review of our late season weevil and our leaf-footed bugs and stink bugs. And the questions in the chat, I think you addressed those in your talk, so that was a good deal.
Okay.
On insecticides for those late season pests, they need to really pay attention to the label.
Right. If I think we talked about that a little bit before the meeting too. If like I said, weevil and some of the other pests can happen late in the season, and so if you do have to spray, then you really need to monitor what the label says, because the label is the rule of the law. You know, it's the rule of the land. So if whatever that label says, and also pay close attention to your harvest interval, because if you're getting close to harvest, then it's really important to pay attention to the label and see how many days you are away from harvest, and be diligent about that time frame, because we've got in some issues on some of our tests that we really didn't need to spray when we sprayed, but if we didn't spray at a certain time, we were going to run into problems with the harvest. So we went ahead and sprayed. Some of them have 7 days, some of them have 21 days. We didn't have enough. We weren't at, in our certain tests, we weren't at threshold level, but we were going to be in our harvest interval level. And so we had to go ahead and make that application, and even though the threshold level wasn't there. So especially late in the season, pay attention to that threshold and that harvest interval.
Yeah. So the PHI, or the pre-harvest interval, is what Kelly's talking about. It can be set up to 7 to 21 days that you're not allowed to spray within that harvest time. And so, you know, if you are close to harvest, you might be looking for those insecticides that have a shorter pre-harvest interval so you can get those on. And then some might state not to spray after shuck split. So you really have to follow those labels, make sure that you're using it properly, so you're not causing any issues for the crop, the safety of your crop use. So the label is a law. You have to follow those regulations on for fungicides, insecticides, just like the wildlife regulations. You have to follow those to make sure everything's done properly. And it's, you know, there's things that we have to adhere to make sure that we have a safe product. So do we have any questions for Kelly? Anybody have any questions? I appreciate him filling in for me. I'm going to be leaning on him a lot since Dr. Mulder retired. And so I appreciate having an expert that I can still have around. So I appreciate Kelly and being.
We'll do our best.
I thank you for tuning in today and giving us a good information today. All right. Well, Charlie Graham, do you have any questions or any comments from the South? Anything that you've seen down in the southern part of the state? Charlie, are you still around?
Not that unusual. I mean, just from traveling around, you know, there was a fair amount of defoliation up in the very northeast part of the state due to bagworms. We had some bagworms down here, but it was fairly light for us. But I did get several calls on controlling those late in the season and things like that. And I mean, Kelly may touch on it more than me, but from my understanding on the bagworms, if you still have those bags hanging in the trees, that's where the female laid her eggs, and you're going to have 500 to 1,000 eggs per bag. And so if you are in the orchard and you see some of those hanging, you might want to pull those out and destroy them. And that'll help out on next year's, especially around the house. If you have them on some of your shrubs and stuff, pull those bags off and destroy them to take care of next year's population. I've seen a little bit of bud moth damage, but that's been mostly in nurseries and stuff where there has been some bud moth activity, and we're finding the pupae and stuff inside the shoots and everything right now. I've cut some of those open and found those in a few places, but other than that, disease pressure was not exceptionally heavy. We've seen a fair amount of I went blank, chuckworm. So we have been cutting some nuts open and finding some chuckworm damage, a little bit of chuckworm. But outside that, we're just seeing that things are running a little bit late. We're probably running, I'd say, at least a week to 2 weeks late on what stage we are right now. I'd already harvested some nuts by this time last year. I was already into check split, and we haven't reached that yet. So, you know, we are running a little bit later this year than we were last year. And other than that, we're just, southern part of the state is really dry unless you go over to the southeast corner, and then they're really wet. And so it just depends on what part of the state you're in. I know they had some really good rains other side of Durant and everything just a couple of days ago. But other than that, we're just kind of waiting on some rains to make sure we have check split on time, and hopefully reduce any vivipar we might be seeing on some of our nuts, and trying to get ready for harvest and everything.
All right. I know on the bagworms that if they did have a bad infestation this season, they may want to be sure and have that window of timing, but late May, early June, to make sure that they're treating at that time. Even if they don't have a crop or something, they may want to go ahead and start treating during that time frame when it's the optimum time for control.
Yeah, that's definitely gonna be a problem for some growers up in the Northeast, because I was in some orchards where they lost the crop due to the freeze that we had, and so they weren't really putting any applications on. And I saw some pecan trees completely defoliated. I mean, probably 80 to 90% of the foliage was gone in some trees from bagworm. You know, they were just hanging out of the trees everywhere.
Right.
So yeah, for sure, growers like that are really gonna have to be looking for things next year and make sure they get a good spray on in the right window next spring to hopefully keep that from happening again.
And it's just kind of a cycle. They're not spraying because I think some of the people I talked to had lost the crop the past 2 years due to freeze. And so if they're defoliating now, then they may not have a crop next season. So that cycle is going to be hard to break unless they actually do get out there and start protecting the trees. But normally they would be spraying for pecan nut case bearer at that time, that early June. And so they would normally be taking care of those bagworm problems. It's a minor pest that just because of the management's kind of off there, it's built up to a major pest for them. So causing some issues for sure, but they need to go ahead and think about treating even if they don't have a crop this next year. So
Mhm.
well, I appreciate Charlie. I know Charlie and Kelly are both going to be at the field day at Ada. And so, yes, Lewis says, congratulations, Charlie, on the Herman Heinrich's Pecan Citation Award. So yes, Charlie has been a great asset to our state and helping us out since he's been here. And the pecan growers awarded him with that honor in June. So we thank him and appreciate him with all he's done. But hope everyone can join us either next month for the Zoom or later on this month, September 23rd for the field day in Ada. Love to see everybody there. And be sure and register online if you're planning to come to that field day. I know there's a few of you that are, you know, Canadians or from Spain or somewhere, probably won't be seeing y'all at that field day, but we hope to see you next month at our Zoom. And if anybody has a question, be sure and get a hold of me anytime. I'll be happy to help you with any of those questions. So thank everyone for joining in today. We'll see you in October. I believe it's the 8th. And so we'll see you next month. You guys have a good start to the fall. So we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye, Becky.
See ya. Thank you, Jacob and Kelly.